Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BAInsights session. Today, we've got another couple of guests, possibly another on the way as well, to talk about data analysis and business analysis and how they both fit together. Before that, though, let's do some introductions. And if we can start with yourself, please, Stoyan.
Okay. So hello guys, my name is Stoyan Chaldakov, and I'm a business and data analyst in the World Bank Group based in Sofia, Bulgaria. I bring with me nearly 10 years of business and data analysis experience. My domain knowledge includes sectors as banks, insurance companies, retail companies, and even more. But yeah, this is more or less my experience and the sectors which I am most experienced.
Perfect. Thanks,
Um,
Stoyan.
Thank you.
And Scott, over to you as well, please, for an intro.
Yeah. Yeah, so my name's Scott Ambler. I've been in the data and well, I guess the modeling space for several decades now. I have authored a few books on both those topics, and I'm currently focused mostly on data stuff, in particular data quality for AI work. And as a result, data analysis is a very serious and important aspect of that overall work.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. And thank you again, Stoyan. So clearly we've got a couple of really good people who will be able to talk about this very topic. So we're in the right place. Good. So maybe we can start, Stoyan, if you would, on how and why business analysis and data analysis are related, if you would, please.
Okay, so how are these two disciplines or activities related? Okay, I think we will all here agree that the BA is mostly focused on understanding the needs, defining the problems, looking for or exploring new opportunities. Then the data analysts and data analysis as a discipline provides the data-driven insights that are need to understand the reason about the problems or just to support with data like any new export opportunities. So on the question, how are they related? My simple answer is I think the connection between these two disciplines is the process of turning raw data or any kind of data in any kind of shapes into information, and then this information is used to support like decision making initiatives and decision making from the managers. Why these fields are related? Here I think it's very famous saying from Edward Deming, who said, without data, you're just a person with an opinion. I could add, and maybe you rely on a good feeling only. So even to be the best business analyst in the world, and you say that I find the biggest problem or I see the best opportunity for our business, if there is no data behind, if in the backend there is no visuals, tables, trend charts, whatever data use, then it's just an opinion. So the simple question of why they're related actually is that, because without data, it's just an opinion. And business analysis, it's at least from my perspective, it's not that valuable without the data.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree, Stoyan. I think excellent point, an excellent start there, and quite an easy way to think about it as we kick off. But yeah, from my perspective, couldn't agree more as well. But Scott, what would be your perspective on that same question?
Yeah, so I fully agree with what Stoyan said. I would also add though, there's some non-overlap that can be very important. So for example, a data analyst might do a fair bit of work doing data profiling of legacy data sources, for example. So it depends on the project, of course, but I do a lot of work in the data warehousing space, and data profiling is a huge task for data analysts. On the other end, they might be actively involved in prototyping, and just like a BA could be as well. But instead, in this case, it'll be prototyping of data visualization. And frankly, the visualization tools are so comprehensive now and so reasonably easy to use that I'm leery about even saying the word prototyping anymore. You're actually just building it. Like you're not really prototyping unless you're like using Excel or something because you can't afford Power BI or whatever your excuse is, or you can't afford Tableau. So it's but call it prototyping if you want to. And
Yeah,
some organizations will not allow business analysts to actually implement, which I think is sort of goofy, but it happens, right? So, but usually in the data space, prototyping is really implementation. There might need to be some tweaking and all that good sort of stuff, but you're really building the real thing at that point.
Scott, what do you mean when you say data profile?
So there'll be legacy data sources, right? And these data sources have been often around for decades. So when you're accessing that data, part of the effort has to be, well, what data is there? What shape is it in? What's the level of quality of it? Like, because you can't trust the documentation, of course, if there is any documentation. So you'll be doing things like just like visualizing the schema, and there's a lot of great tools to do that. You'll be doing things like, doing a deep dive into, well, what are the actual contents of this table, as opposed to, what the names are telling us and, what maybe the documentation is saying should be there. Because it can be different in night and day sometimes. So that's data profiling in a nutshell. And there's a lot more to, you'll be doing statistical analysis perhaps and all that good sort of stuff. But basically, you're trying to figure out what the heck is in this data source is the fundamental question that you're
Gotcha.
trying to answer.
And that, I mean, it's familiar to me the way you described it. I'm sure it's probably therefore familiar to BAs watching this as well in terms of, maybe not on a big data set, but I think during the investigation stages, we do spend a lot of time trying to interpret, what information is recorded in system processes or elsewhere, how to group it by themes, and really just try and understand it a little bit. So at least now we can put more of a name to it. That's for sure. Okay, brilliant. Well, and perfect timing it seems as well, because we've got Helen just about to join us as well. Unfortunately, we'll give her a few seconds to possibly join and to listen in on that particular question, assuming she joins. But when she does, we'll carry on. But aside from that, I mean, my perspective on how and why BAs and business analysis and data analysis relates as well is really just that both of us, if I think about it from a BA perspective, we often are trying to identify where that data comes from, what type of information we would expect to see, thinking about data and information in perhaps quite conceptual ways until we've got the opportunity to look into systems and see that it exists really. So I think before otherwise as well, I think problem solving is also very applicable activity that we use data for. I'm glad to see Helen. How are you doing, Helen?
I ended up joining on my phone. The laptop is being rather funny.
Oh, sorry to hear that. But you've for anyone that's joining, we've done some introductions to Stoyan and Scott, and we're just answering the first question really, which is how and why business analysis and data analysis are related. So you joined at a perfect time, Helen. I wonder though, before you give us your answer on that, would you mind just giving yourself a brief introduction, please?
Yes, I'm Helen Appleton. I've been around the business analysis and also worked as a data analyst for nearly 30 years now. I did a degree in business analysis, but found I also enjoyed the data side of things. Recently, I've come back to business analysis as the two seem to have blended together more again.
Perfect. Well, I feel like we're just on the introduction alone, and now we've definitely got a full set because both Scott and Stoyan are similar to yourself in terms of having that business analysis and data analysis expertise as well. Whilst I've never held the title of data analyst, I know I've certainly done a little bit over my years as well. I wonder, Helen, what would be your perspective on how and why BA or business analysis and data analysis are related?
I think they're very much related. To me, the business analysis came out of the IT side of the world, and it was when people couldn't code and go off to meetings at the same time. So there was always that link back to the data. But I think the difference is quite often a mindset. in that when you're doing the business analysis, you're quite open. You need to be able to start from a blank piece of paper. You need to be wanting to talk to people. For a data analyst, I think they're the other side, that they like to sit quietly and be more solitary and think continuously about one particular topic. To be good in this world at the moment, I think the two are coming together, and it's quite a difficult challenge to bridge that gap in doing both jobs at the same time.
And I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who maybe find themselves in one camp, not the other, and or others like myself who know from time to time you would propose that you're fully into the business analysis type mentality, you're speaking to stakeholders, understanding processes, listening to their issues or their requirements. But then, in order to back that up and get the evidence to support what you're hearing, then we might go and delve into the detail and try and understand what data is available to support the information we're hearing, or maybe just to inform a subsequent conversation that will get us into more detail.
I don't believe it should be essential for business analysts to do things like SQL, but it has been very useful in the last few days, and it's the first time in about 2 years I've actually used SQL. But when you actually want to find the answers as to why things aren't actually tallying up within systems, it's a really useful skill to have that within your toolkit.
I agree. And we may well, I'm sure we will talk about SQL in a short while. Thank you, Helen. All right. So what we're doing now is we talk about how a business analysis, how can business analysis, data analysis activity practically, if it's applicable, be approached together. I wonder, Scott, could I ask you that question first, please?
Yeah, so I almost always approach them together. So data is just one aspect of what you're likely looking into, right? Like and at one end of the spectrum, you might have something that's just like pure 100% data thing. That's pretty rare, but maybe. But usually you're somewhere, and at the other end of the spectrum, I guess there might be absolutely no data involved whatsoever. I've never actually run into that, but in theory, maybe it could happen. But everywhere else, data is just one more aspect of what you need to understand about this domain that you're in the process of analyzing and exploring. So it's just one more thing when it gets down to it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Helen, what would be your perspective on that same question?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, how can business analysis and data analysis practically be approached together?
I find it difficult as well to see how you can split them apart. Because like was just said, I don't think I've ever had a project that has not been to do with data. If you're in any business analysis role, you really want to benchmark at the start, your starting position, to realise your changes. And very rarely could you ever see that just being qualitative. Most of the time, you should be looking to prove that you have improved a process, created a saving, something that would be numerical and would take data to prove that case.
Yeah, and I would agree. I wonder, Stoyan, what were your perspectives as well?
Yeah. So my opinion is actually the same, because in my experience, I've never conducted like a business analysis without data involved. And I think the answer is pretty simple, because business analysis, it contains the word analysis. And in order to do analysis, you need facts. And facts, for me, equal data. So there is no way, maybe at some point of the business analysis, maybe it's possible data do not to be like that heavily included, like, for example, to identify the shareholders, let's say. But maybe after that, everything is data related, everything you need. In the real world, how I see it, and based on my experience, of course, the business analyst, the focus is really more on the enabling change to identify really the needs. The focus of the data analysis is really the data, to find the data, of course, with the support the business analyst. Then clean, transform, do some exploratory data analysis, things like that. Then to identify what KPIs, what metrics are needed in order to answer the questions which the business analyst answered or is trying to answer. So on that stage, the business analyst is more involved than the data analyst, because the business context is more on the business analyst side. So once we have the KPIs and metrics identified, then the data analyst develop everything, even creating the visuals, the dashboards, and then the business analyst is involved in order to understand the visuals and to create some really good storytelling based on these visuals, and to support decision making, of course, on a higher level. So if I have to wrap up, yes, everything starts with the business analyst. Even nowadays, because as Scott also mentioned, that the BI tools are so user-friendly that it's even not needed to have some strong technical background in order to connect to data, export the data, visualize the data. So saying that maybe the role of the data analysts in the future will have less and less impact in the general picture, and the how to say it, the more important role will be on the business analyst side. Nowadays, I think it's the opposite, because if the business analyst have the right skills to use the data, he can do nothing. Again, to return to Edward saying, it's just an opinion, gut feeling, nothing.
Yeah.
But with the time, I think that will change with AI, and we'll see, of course. But this is my my internal feeling. So yeah, this is it. This is my.
I mean, it feels like we're all in agreement on that, because I totally buy into and agree with what you're saying, because I like yourselves, have not come across a situation where a business analyst has not in some way thinking about information or business, even from a point of collating a list of their stakeholders. That in itself becomes data, and they have to start analysing that information, without the additional perspectives they may take in terms of actually looking into sourcing data, qualifying it, thinking about how it might interface between one set of users or one system and another, or to display it in a dashboard, or to present some information on screen. Data is always part of the story. And I think, as Scott was saying, it's another aspect or dimension. I can't remember the exact word Scott used, but I think we're all in agreement on that front. So it shows that for anyone out there thinking about business analysis and thinking about data analysis as two very separate disciplines, probably reassuring for them to know that it is very much connected, and possibly for certain business analysts, they're doing all of the data analysis themselves, whereas there's certainly more complex situations where the data analysis is a quite specific level of detail, which might require a whole new set of skills and tools and techniques to really get at and inquire on data. I think touching on that now, I wonder, Helen, if I can ask you this question first, in terms of, are you able to share any real life examples of where data has played a key part or a key role in your data, in your business analysis?
I think I can talk a little bit at the moment about a project that I'm on that's actually looking at a supply chain. And it's looking through the detail of the supply chain to see where you may have companies that are in some way fragile and things like that. It's a different set of data at the moment. Typically, it's been very tabular that I've used in the past. But now data is turning into something that's more like a web that you have to analyse. And that's an interesting turn as to how we're having to look at data today.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I can recall myself, sort of, I guess my limitation at one point on data was seeing it as a fairly flat spreadsheet within Excel, viewing it as a table. And then as I started getting exposed to multi-dimensional data and cubing and the relationship between, many different aspects, that in itself starts to bring it to life, and you start to see it visualized in charts and much more as well. So it's certainly taken on a life much more than it would have done in my early BA days.
I think there's a lot more now around data that BAs can get involved in, and you don't necessarily need to be a data architect or something like that, but it's very useful to see how data is moving and the fact that data can be completely unstructured and what you can do with it, because that is what will take us towards understanding the potential of AI and where the opportunities are.
That's right. Yeah, Stoyan, can I ask you that same question as well, please, in terms of sharing a real-world example of where you've seen data analysis play a key part in business analysis, or if you like, you can flip it around and talk about when business analysis plays a key part in data analysis, whichever you choose.
Yeah, actually, in maybe 99% my experience, the data is like have a key role in business analysis. The example which I will share is related to a web application which is using around the globe. And based on a survey which was conducted, we noticed that the performance question has the lowest rating, like mostly 1 or 2 stars. And the management wasn't happy with that result and give a task to the business analysts to find the reasons, to understand what's happening and why it's like that. Because the other questions were fine. The features, the offers, everything was fine, but the performance bad, okay, which is not good. Me as a business analyst back then, I spoke with data analysts in order to understand, okay, what kind of data is needed for web application to understand the performance. And then we find out that there is a traffic data which is collected from one specific Azure services, which we can use in order to track this performance of each page of the application. Okay, we collected the data. The short story, of course, it has a lot of difficulties because the data wasn't good. We need to implement some kind of, to change the code and things like that in order to make the data more reliable, because otherwise it wasn't like that. And based on the data, there were 2 conclusions which were made back then. The first conclusion is that the drop down of the satisfaction and the page load time started to increase almost immediately where a new feature was implemented. Even that the QA said everything is fine, we're ready to go, go to prod, okay, but it seems that something was wrong. The second conclusion based on the data was that in some specific area of the globe, for example, some small islands or in Middle East, the performance is really bad compared with the US, for example. And if you see the numbers with the US, you say, okay, the problems are not that bad. But if you see in Middle East, we had a big problem there. So we presented these 2 conclusions based on the data, and based on the first one, the so just to recall the first one. Okay, I'll start with the second. The second one with the performance, the developers created some code lightweighting for countries. For example, if you log on from a country, which is from a specific list of countries, the web application redirects you to a lightweighted code with no pictures, for example, or with less features which you can use, which more or less improve the performance. And the first, which was compared with the feature that was just implemented, that part of the code was sent to the developers to do review. So it's like really example based on data, what we identified, conclusions, and then call to actions. Actually, both to the developers, of course, because it's no other chance. But data was heavily involved. Even it's really, I maybe explained it too simple, But in order to find the regions, we need to connect user with specific IDs, to use cookies. So it was kind of a merging different data sets in order to get the big picture. But more or less, this is the example.
Yeah, and there's another example, Stoyan, of where there's a different perspective we can take of data, and it's about I think what either yourself or Scott mentioned earlier about painting that picture with the data. And so I think what you've described there is a good example of that. Scott, would you be able to share an example yourself of business analysis and data analysis coming together?
Yeah, definitely. And what I'll do is I'll turn it around and I'll talk about how business analysis is needed to fix data analysis problems. So I do a lot of work in the AI space right now, and what I've been doing lately is applying the DV2 methodology for data warehousing to provide continual data for both AI stuff, like building AI systems, as well as your classic data-driven decision making of executives. So when you're doing data warehousing type work, you would think that there's a lot of data work to be done, and of course there is, but it's not the primary issue. And what happens if you allow data modeling and data analytics work to be the primary requirements driver of a data warehouse, you will almost always drive it into the ground. You'll build something that people don't want to use. And what you need to do, and this is what blows the minds of the data people for the most part, is you really need your primary requirements should be usage requirements. Perhaps use cases, but they tend to be too big. Instead, what you need is a data flavor of a user story, something I call question stories. So what questions are you using this data warehouse to answer is like the fundamental, what's the actual requirements? Well, I want to answer questions. So your requirements should be questions. So not data stuff, like not data models, not all this other fancy, wacky data stuff. So if you want to increase the odds of success of a data warehousing project, and frankly, they have a reasonably bad success rate, as do AI projects, you really want to be usage driven. So you need to invest in business analysis efforts in order to gather those sorts of requirements. Now, the data stuff's still important. It's just not as important as, more classic business analysis stuff would be. And that's not very intuitive for the most part.
Yeah.
At least not to.
Thanks, Scott. And I would add to the three excellent examples we both shared. I think it's probably worth people recognizing as BAs that, just validating the business case or connecting things through traceability is in itself could be an element of data analysis. But an example I would like to share isn't that. I was recently, a few years back, working on a project that was designed really to share with, I think it was like relationship managers in a bank, to share with them where the products that they've sold their customers, where they were in the onboarding life cycle, so that they can say to their customers, you're going to get your loan or you're going to get your deposit in a certain amount of days or hours, hopefully. And that was a really good opportunity to not only test a number of use a number of BA techniques, but loads that related to data. So for example, we were not as BAs familiar with all of the terminology that was being expressed to us on the project. So just using a few modeling techniques to just recognize what type of data elements we were talking about. Is it customer data? Is it trade data? And plenty of others, and how that relates to each other. But then thinking about, what is it if we took a customer? What constitutes the customer? What type of information do we need to share for a customer? Then how do we link that up to other things that are working their way through the pipeline? Thinking about the stages in the life cycle of a customer or of a transaction and the data points that come with it. Thinking about, what additional information is useful to the relationship managers so that it can be surfaced and shown on screen. And then how we visualize that and make it as easy to digest as possible. And if there's anomalies or there's key information that they should be sharing with a certain set of customers, how can we give that access to them very obviously so that they can find the needle in the haystack, as it were, without having to trawl through all the information themselves. So it's a really good example, I think, of a project that's probably not too dissimilar to what most BAs get involved in terms of trying to provide a solution, in this case, the front end reports and the visualization, but recognizing it's connected to a business process. It's there because users are working on stuff and that other users and clients need to see the result of that stuff and that information, and there's things connected together. So it was a really good example for me of how business analysis and data analysis played a key part. Now, what was interesting is that in that situation, because we actually had some good infrastructure, the BAs were generally able to access the information we needed to do most of the data analysis ourselves. But I know there's been other examples where having specific data analysts is required, really, rather than having just the BA do the work. But I wonder on that particular question, on that fault rather, I feel like we touched on it a little bit, but do we think that, or do you think, and I'll start with you, Stoyan, first if I can, do you think that business analysts need strong data analysis skills, or is data analysis purely a specialised role?
I think it's a skill that is good to have. It's strong, maybe not, but at least to be familiar with the so infamous command export in Excel, at least that skill is required. Data analysis in general, I think, can be like a totally separate area of expertise with totally separate profile, especially for the strong data analysts, like the ones who have some scientific or really deep statistical knowledge. Mostly of the data analysts which I work for, they are not that deep involved into some heavy statistical analysis. So when I hear strong, I refer to these guys. For the business analyst, I don't think this is required. Nowadays, again, the BI tools first are so many. It's not just Excel. Mostly, or some of the BI tools already implemented some AI functionality. For example, Copilot with Power BI. It's really very easy for the business analyst without any strong data analysis skills to consume data, to understand, to try to understand it, to visualize it, and things like that. So the simple question is, it's good to have, it's not must to have, and in the future, it won't be needed, I think.
Thank you, Stoyan. Scott, what would be your perspective?
I would disagree. So I think I'm a big fan of people having a wide range of skills, and I think data analysis and business analysis are some of those skills. But I think data is becoming more and more important for organizations. So I would expect people to be more data literate, to do a better job on the data side of things. And the challenge is that these organizations have a lot of data debt. They have a lot of some very serious challenges with data quality. And do you know, as an analyst, do you understand that? Do you know what data sources you should be using, and what, if you're doing the analysis, like there might be some easy data sources to get at, but they're the wrong ones. Are you on the ball enough to know that? Because you can make some very serious bad decisions as a result. And your stakeholders might not know, right? So if you're just blindly doing this work and without the skills to sort of detect, this doesn't smell right, you could get into serious trouble. So I would rather see people with a wider range of data skills. Now, are you going to be an expert? Probably not. But you should certainly be, reasonably solid at this sort of stuff. And there's a danger in the tools with, the tools can do so much for you, but if you don't understand what the tools are doing, then you're flying blind. I'm seeing a lot of this in the AI space. People are building really, or they're failing at their pilot project. They have a horrendous failure rate because the AI tools do so much for you. And there's like so much black box stuff going on that people really don't understand the implications of what's happening, and it's just not working out for them, and they don't know why. And or it's not working out and they can't detect that it's not working out, which is even worse. So yeah, I'm always wary about the tools. I'm a firm believer in great tooling, but I don't trust them at all. And you need to know. You need to know what the heck is going on. And we're seeing some really questionable stuff with like code generation and other things that yeah, I just don't. I've got a master's degree in AI. I don't trust AI at all. So maybe I'm just paranoid, but yeah, don't trust your tools. Just don't trust your tools.
It feels like a good mentality to have anyway, Scott. I mean, I think if you've got a BA out there, a data analyst, not from the outset trusting their data, trusting their tool, trusting the AI, or even trusting their own techniques until the data, the techniques, the output, and the tool improves beyond doubt that actually they're seeing the right information. I think that's a good thing. It means you're not relying on that perspective.
And fundamentally, there's such a large amount of data out there, like poor quality data. I work under the assumption that the data is wrong because it will be. There'll be bias in the data, absolutely 100% guarantee of that, and there'll be some bad quality data in there somewhere if you can find it. Often is blatantly obvious, but not always. That's the stuff that's not blatantly obvious. That's tends to be what burns you in the long run.
And it's certainly a good. I mean, there's many good points that Perry you just shared just in the last few questions. But I think for anyone observing this and thinking about data analysis, business analysis, definitely thinking about data quality, reliability is something that should be at the forefront of their mind, in my opinion, as well. Helen, I'm conscious that you've not had an opportunity to opine on this question. So, what will be your view?
Well, I think because the others have been so heavily into the data, and I agree with what they say, and I think business analysts more and more will need to understand data because that's where the projects are going to come from. I think it's worth mentioning that on the other side, you have got projects that are not driven by building IT systems that data analysts, that business analysts are involved in. You have got situations with organisational change that you're looking at restructuring an organisation, a new target operating model, that you're looking at what people with what skills will you need in the future state. So those types of business analysts, I don't think they need a huge amount of data skills. Pivot tables in Excel is probably enough for them to understand the data. But I think even those roles will become more data focused. And if people haven't got the data understanding in their skill set, they do need to find a place to start. At least understanding the dashboards and being able to drill into the data so that they can understand it as a user rather than being as technical as perhaps some of the other projects that are being mentioned are here.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it just shows the different dimensions of the question there. It's not really one size fits all. It depends. I think before you joined the call, before in fact we even turned the call on, I think Scott was talking about it depends, and I think that's something that is very obvious, very prevalent for BAs and applicable perhaps in this case.
I think it's interesting to see that some of the Microsoft documentation at the moment that's coming out, if you're a user of the tool rather than a developer in any way, they're quite often now using the term business analyst and business analytics to do the job of what used to be a data analyst, to investigate the data and to tell the story. And I think as that comes on as language, that is going to be something else that brings the two skills together even more.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting because that storytelling theme. I mean, I know. I think we've all mentioned it in different ways. We can use the data, the business analysis to really bring that story together in terms of, here's the evidence, I guess, to support a requirement or an issue that someone's having, or actually here's a story that we can paint of maybe a different outcome that we've identified through the analysis as well. Could go on forever on that one. It's quite a broad area. Sorry, Helen.
You're also seeing degrees and masters in business analytics. And if that isn't a blend between both of the skill sets coming through into the market, seeing that demand, I don't know what other signal you've got to say that this is what people are seeing. as to where the profession's going.
Yeah, I would agree. So definitely for those watching this, spend a bit of time thinking about business analysis and data analysis, but don't pick just one camp to exist in entirely, I would say. Just as we start to think about that, actually, we'll talk about people coming into business analysis or data analysis, or hopefully both. Scott, how can business analysts improve their ability to interpret and leverage data insights, or even think about data more broadly?
I think it's just being aware of the need to do that and being aware of the tooling options. Like we've talked about Excel a lot, and certainly that's a darn good tool, and arguably the number one deployed development tool in history. But there's a lot of other good tools that you can leverage. Data profiling tools, for example, can give you significantly better insight than what you'd get out of Excel, or at least, well, you can always hand jam in Excel, I guess, but you'll spend like 100 times more effort than if you'd used a tool that's actually designed to do that. But and then of course, like data modeling tools. If you can read and understand data models, there's a lot of great tools that you just point it to the database and say, hey, show me the model, and you'll get this horrifically laid out model. But it's more than likely the database is a total mess. But all this is incredibly valuable stuff if you understand how to use the tools and all that good sort of stuff. So I think it's just take the opportunity to learn. I'm a firm believer in like pairing with people with other skills. So if you're weak on the data side, well, pair with somebody who's strong on the data side. Work closely with them for a while. Pick up their skills. Share some skills with some of your skills with them, and so on. So take classes. Watch YouTube videos. There's such a wide range and wealth of information out there now, most of which is free. You can pick up the stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's an excellent point, Scott. I mean, it resonates quite a lot with me because I remember, at some point in the past, I remember it quite specifically. A BA, I was tasked with doing some data analysis, and really didn't know how to go about it. I started speaking to some of my colleagues in technology, starting with how I can access the data itself, and through speaking to them, being shown what they were doing in SQL at the time, it was it's good exposure actually to how data was connecting all of the different aspects that I had to look at, and then going on, just working with others to start thinking about how it could be visualized, how the database schema might present the tables that were available. And it just really demonstrated to me that as you said, going to speak to people, speak to data analysts, speak to developers, speak to the users of data, and it really gives you a load of different perspectives that will be more than applicable when it comes to your business analysis or your data analysis role, or your combined role, if that's the case. Helen, what's your view on how BAs can improve their ability to interpret or leverage data?
I think trying to put together a clear story for the client is probably the biggest thing that a BA needs to be able to do in terms of data analysis, because it's all very well going through into the technical skills and things like that, but a BA's main role is to help the client understand the situation. So the storytelling there to take the client on a journey, to understand what the problem is, to understand how big the impact would be, and to understand, does the data need cleaning up? Do they need to think differently about how they're using the data? What is the data telling them? I'm still hearing a lot here as a business analyst being very heavily into data analysis. And I'm not really convinced that it's that far and that necessary. I think I'm more in the middle ground here.
Yeah.
In that I see the business analyst really as the one starting with the blank piece of paper, saying, what does this project need to do? And in a lot of uncertainty. Whereas a lot of the data analysis here that we're talking about seems to be far more, you need to extract the data, you need to process the data, you need to tell the story from the end. So I think it's showing another difference to me, that we're talking a lot about data, but we are still missing that you don't start with the data in a lot of projects. You start with finding out who the people are, finding out what the people want, and a lot of those soft skills that the business analyst needs as a first starting point.
Yeah, I think it's a really,
I
really.
don't know if that answered the question. It just took me off in a different mindset.
I think that's the nice thing about these conversations, Helen, that we don't have to sort of go down the very narrow path in terms of how we answer the question. And it does bring forward another interesting perspective on it as well. In that, yes, we shouldn't just view it, I don't think, as you say, as just what data is already in the system and can already be sourced. But if we think about it a lot more holistically, we're doing our initial business analysis, maybe what type of information are we interested in? What type of information is relevant to this situation, or using your words, to this story, before we worry about the data that underpins it.
Somebody said earlier about the business questions, I think in regard to data warehousing. And I think I'll echo that. The first thing is find out from the people what questions they want to answer. Most of the time, it will come down to capturing data and processing it somehow. But it's that question, first of all, that you've got to start thinking about, and finding the right people for the right questions to find the data that is needed, not just the data you've already got in-house, not just what's in the warehouse. But if you just work from what you've already got, you're only going to give the same answers. Whereas if you get a different question and you go out and say, right, how do I gather the data to answer these questions? You might get something that's more valuable for the business.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed to get something more valuable for the business. It's a guarantee.
I would agree with that. My terminology was a bit passive there. It should have been more absolute.
Yeah, I do this all the time. You're guaranteed to get a better answer.
Yeah. Stoyan, sorry, I should give you an opportunity to answer that same question as well.
Improve the ability to interpret and leverage data insights. Tools for sure, a lot on the market, like data storing and visualization best practices, for sure. That's something can be learned. Even some simple rules like set the stage, present the data, do any conclusion, call to actions, really simple things which can enhance the result from the business analysis and data analysis. But for me, the most important thing, which every business analyst have to do, is the domain knowledge. Because every number, even if you have the best data, clean, everything is perfect, without some domain specific knowledge, like market trends, like regulations, like customer behavior for the specific business, competitive landscape, everything, if it's missing, the data really doesn't matter. Even if your company has really the best data, create the best visuals, if you not view that data in the context of the domain knowledge which the business analyst can have, then it doesn't matter the data. Because, for example, profit margin of 5% for one company in a high competitive market is one, but in low competitive market is different. 100 complaints when you have a couple of thousand customer is one thing. If you have 10 complaints with 11 customers, it's totally different. So without this domain knowledge and business specifics, even if you're with the best with the tool, you use the best, you have the best data, nothing matter without that. That's why, from my perspective, the skill that will improve the ability to interpret the result is the domain knowledge.
Yeah. And that's another interesting and different perspective on this time. Agree. Yeah. Well, I'm conscious of time, and I feel like we'll only have a few more minutes left. So rather than us go into any more deep questions and take longer than the time we've got, maybe we should quit while we're ahead on that. Let's therefore let me thank you, the three of you, for sharing your perspectives on what is clearly a much bigger topic than this conversation. But hopefully, for people viewing this, you know, you can have an appreciation of both the, you know, the close affiliation between data analysis and business analysis, but also recognise the benefits in specialising and drilling into different aspects of data as well as business analysis as well. And probably to echo the point Helen made a moment ago, you know, we don't, as business analysts, we don't have to get lost in the data either. We can raise things a little bit as well. So thank you once again for your perspectives. For anybody that's watching this, if you have perspectives of your own and you wish to share or questions, please use the comments to do so. Otherwise, if you haven't already, like and subscribe. And I'll look forward to speaking to Stoyan, Scott, Helen, and other guests in the future. So thank you, everyone.